Now get to Lagos. We've been joined by senior energy consultant, Dr. Wiz of Enang. Doctor, thanks so much for being part of the program tonight. While I was speaking with Prof, we've seen the explanation from the Minister of Power that it looks like we are trying to fix the situation, but the security terrain, the people that are trying to do the work are being under threat. Give us an understanding about this and how technical is it that the ministry is trying to manage the situation, both the TCL and everyone?
I think the terrain that we're looking at is typically embroiled with the issue of, say, vandalism and jihadists.
Doctor, if you can hear me clearly.
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, Doctor, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I said, the terrain, where this challenge is happening is very much embroiled with challenges as to, being able to fix those transmission lines all the way through, the security challenges. And you have to also understand that, because of militants around that area, it's quite a tricky one. But even when you solve all of that, how do you then, when you restore the infrastructure required for the transmission of power, it still shows us that we have vulnerability when it comes to a single point source of transmission. So we produce power at the central grid, and then we send it to those states. And then anything that cuts them off means that the rest of the states, those guys do not have power. So I think it speaks to the fact that we're quite vulnerable. I think it speaks to the fact that we need to start looking at operationalizing the Electricity Act of 2023 to have decentralized power stations across and have better redundancies in the system. It also begs to ask how we plan to upgrade some of the obsolete, equipment that are like between 40 to 50 years old. Those are some of the things that we need to think about. Because not just fixing this problem, it is ensuring long-term reliability of power supply.
When we begin to pay attention to some of the issues that have been raised, amidst that petrol, has been on a high side. We've seen the recent increase and the explanation from the president of Dangote of him having the product, and then marketers and NNPC are not lifting the product. And now you're having a blackout again in some regions. It's now becoming so difficult for a whole lot of Nigerians. We've seen the collapse of the national grid, over 8 times just this year alone. That those that feels, that proper management or to just provide highlighted issues of having, better technologies deployed, to solve this situation. People are paying, the consumers are paying for it, but it seems that the quality of what is being received is not really workable and better in the country.
Yeah, absolutely, you're spot on there. And Edikan, that speaks to one critical aspect. How well does the money that we get from the additional tariff that we get from the Ban Air customers, how well does that cascade beyond the distribution folks? How well does that cascade through a backward integration down into the transmission and down into the production, the generation? The reason I'm saying all of this is very simple. The idea of raising the tariffs of the Ban A was to make it to be cost reflective and to provide the ample funds required for equipment upgrade. But think about it. If your equipment upgrade is only at the distribution point, then you still have obsolete transmission equipment as well as obsolete generation equipment. We're still going to have a problem. So that's the first thing we need to think about. The government needs to consider how well do we backwardly integrate the rewards on the Ban A back all the way to the GenCos so that we can have them have a sort of a mandate on being able to upgrade their facilities accordingly. That's really important because reliability has a very good correlation with the quality of service when it comes to electricity supply. And you're right. Yes, the customers are paying, and they're quite frustrated. Even more so right now, you really do not want to do the economics of running your generator sets for the equivalent amount of power versus even if you were paying on the band A. I'll tell you on average that for every 3,000 naira you spend on a band A, you will spend almost 12,000 naira equivalent if you're running a petrol engine for the same level of power. And perhaps even less because you wouldn't be able to own everything. So it makes a very justified case for the government to be more serious, make sure these savings are not just enveloped by just the distribution folks, and the generation and the transmission folks have a share. And there is a mandated quota for how they need to steward the equipment upgrade, ultimately, so that we can enhance our reliability.
Let's get to the architecture of the country's transmission. We've also seen that from the fragility of it, when situations like just as what happened in the north gets to surfaces, there have also been issues of, I mean, would I say the incapacity of managing the transmission, the TCN managing the situation so well. Sometimes some regions of this country have been in darkness. Some communities have been in darkness after the national grid. And that those that feels how they respond to some of these situations has not really helped. We've seen that, if the disco, the distributors have been doing their works in distributing, what then can you say about the architecture of the country's transmission network? Give us an understanding about how all of these things works.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, think about it. For if you're transmitting power from a central grid, and it's going through one single point, and then if there is a vandalism at that point, it means there's a cutoff from the central grid. Then you know that ab initio, without a sparing philosophy, that means there is another line that could potentially be used to route the electricity. Once you cut off that single point, everything on the grid fails. Now, looking with benefits of hindsight, that sort of a design was a bit flawed. Even if you wanted to take a single point of generation of power and send it up north, you ought to, of course, consider, various forms of redundancies within the system, whether it be different lines routing across various centers to make sure that if one of the distribution channels are impaired, you could potentially have another route to carry on with your distribution. That's on one part. But looking forward, what do we need to do? This is why I said, although we're playing catch up, the Electricity Act of 2023 gives us that a bit of wriggle room to be able to decentralize power, meaning the states can generate it, they can transmit it, so that even if you were to vandalize the one for a couple of states or one state, it would not generally put the entire states in the north into a total blackout. So, yes, we are learning the hard way what we should have done in a legacy design. But with the benefit of hindsight, we need to put more redundancies in our system design. We also need to ensure that we take seriously the provisions given by the Electricity Act as we generate our electricities from the various states. So whether or not you feel more comfortable using, say, for example, gas to generate it, or you wanted to use renewable energy, I think that should be the conversation, because in the north there's a lot of heat and from the sun, and that means that potentially the solar energy is quite one that we could even think about for decentralized applications. So it calls for a lot of diversified portfolios in terms of our energy portfolio. It also calls for a more of a design with a lot of redundancies when it comes to the transmission and distribution of electricity.
All right, Doctor. This is a statement from the Minister of Power. I earlier said he has attributed some of these challenges to sabotage and vandalization of the infrastructure of the ministry, and that is not about national grid collapse this time. And I also went further to say that in as much as that we should not allow the national assets from being ruined, by bandits and terrorists. The guests I heard earlier, Proffers, said it is not the handiwork of bandits. This is not the handiwork of terrorists. We cannot find that under the circumstances of where we are in the in the developed nations as we are today, with exposures to technology, we can also the issues of this nature can be well managed and not really pushing the blame to bandit. Does it look that people at the minister is trying to push the blame somewhere, or does it look that the Northerners are trying to also push the blame somewhere because the Northern governors made raised this major concern among other issues?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, as I alluded to, is that we have the issue of vandalism and obsolescence playing a role in, I mean, when you look at the 99.9% case of power outage in the country generally. And that applies even in this case. Now, the both points are valid. And for me, it's not about who is saying the truth. It's looking at what are the lessons learned. What can we do differently? How can we get from the known to the unknown? So what is the known? We do have inherent structural problems because we do need to transmit power, and we're setting it across lines that are pretty much exposed and at a point where there's only one single point of passage. Once you get that impaired, the rest do not have electricity. So that's first thing we need to understand. The second thing is that because we do know, right? If you look at your risk management index, you want to look at the probability of risk and the consequences of occurrence. Now, if you look at this case, the probability of risk of it occurring, of vandalism occurring, is very high because the power lines are exposed, they're not buried on the ground. The second thing is the consequences or risk of the risk maturing is quite high, because what it simply means is that an entire civilization of people will be cut out of power. So when you have a high consequence, high probability, it means that the government ought to be deploying, very serious security personnel, so at least attenuate the risk associated with vandalism. Let's even deal with the ones with obsolescence of equipment. But that's really what we need to do. So I think as a way of positing an idea, preferring solutions, I like to say that I think right now the Ministry of Power needs to be looking at all their critical infrastructure. By critical infrastructure, I mean infrastructure that is supplying electricity to quite a number of states. Look at those infrastructure and say which of them have a high probability and a high consequences if things go wrong, and then how then can we put in whether it is security posts around those areas to make sure such vandalism doesn't happen, whilst we simultaneously plan to do a backward integration of all the gains that we've made from the Ban A tariffs back into the GenCos, the transmission and the GenCos, to make sure that those equipment upgrades are happening. Basically, we have two risks: the risk of obsolescence and the risk of vandalism. And this is kind of my thoughts about how we can push this forward.
All right, Doctor, just before I'll let you go, what is your final take? Because we're trying to see how some of these, can be constrained in terms of how we can get better. If Ghana and neighbors have sufficient power, Nigeria should also rise to the occasion and see what they can do for sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an irony, right? Because you mentioned Ghana and our neighbors, but you also look at some numbers that we are also exporting power to those some of those our neighbors, and so it is important for us to really look at, I think, the whole power infrastructure again. And it's not enough to pass the Act of 2023. To operationalize the Act, I think we need to have a discussion between the minister and some of the governors at the subnational levels that are looking at setting up a power plants. Get them that support that is required. Share lessons learned, because a lot of these governors perhaps do not have the experience of producing electricity and all the challenges that comes with it. I think there needs to be cross-pollination of some of the lessons learned from the center down to the subnationals to say, how can we help you? And the other thing is that, think about it. When we're talking about equipment upgrades, we are talking about, the aspect of continued investments. And for you to get continued investment in a sector, it means that you obviously are able to, guarantee the bankability of that sector. So I see the ongoing reforms with the Band A customers and all of that. That's the beginning of a reform. But I think one of the ways that you have to think about this is either two ways of paying for a service. Either the government pays in form of giving subsidies, or the people pay. And for the people to pay, it means they are happy that you are giving them absolute value for their money. So I think we need to also be in a case where we are holding the discourse accountable. If you're in Band A, there should be an accountability to make sure you actually have absolutely between 20 to 24 hours of light. And of course, then the government then takes that and draws a roadmap to say, as we're going to upgrade other bands, and even as we, the funds we've made from Band A, this is how we're going to begin our equipment upgrade, and this is how the roadmap, maybe a 10-year roadmap to getting Nigeria to that level. Remember, Edikan, yes, we are underproducing, but we have a lot of losses on the transmission line, and then we have yet another losses on the distribution line. So that means we need to fix even the value chain first to even get the number of the quota that we are producing before we even think about more production centers.
Dr. Enang is a senior energy consultant. Thanks so much for sharing part of your evening with us on the program Big Talk.
Thank you very much.
All right, everyone, a whole lot of concern, and our heart still goes out to the people of the northern part of this country, who for some days have had the issues of power outages, which has affected the economy. Statistics and experts have argued that over some 1 trillion naira have been lost in respect to how all of this has gone down in the northern part of this country, has affected the lives, is posing security threat. And the president have also responded in a bid that the NSA and the minister must work together to see how they can restore power. And the minister of power has also confirmed that in few days' time, power will be restored in the north. But just as the tensions and the voices of the people that are echoing in the northern part, they just want the power restored just to be able to address all of the economic woes they are being confronted with since this challenge confronted them. Well, that's the size of a conversion. Just also the tips that the Senate has confirmed the 7 nominees, the ministerial nominees that were sent by the president, the Senate earlier today after the screening, and they have confirmed the ministers waiting on the president to swear them in the office. Tomorrow on the program, we'll also be highlighting what is the tax ahead of the ministers. We've seen the Ministry of Humanitarian, we've also seen other ministries that were rejigged and some meshed together. We'll also x-ray how they can go and what's the way forward for Nigeria, where Nigerians are not just after about the new ministers. Well, their argument is that they want development, they want issues of economy hardship be addressed. This is what the Nigerian people are speaking. And tomorrow on the program, we'll explore all of that, the impact of the new appointment, and the way forward for Nigeria. Thanks so much for being part of the program tonight on Big Talk. See you again. My name is Edikan Michael.